I want to talk a little bit about Florida State's position. They get destroyed against Georgia. I mean, it's horrifying. And then that turned into, and I'll only do this when I see like it being other media members, and I'm just like pick from the randomness of it. But people either that I respect or have zero respect for, going like, hey, the committee got it right. All right. Like that was a popular thing after Florida State gets smoked. And for Florida State fans, that's not a lot of fun, right? Because it's not fair either. It is a Florida State team, as we know, the quarterback issues, and then you have 24 guys, I think was the total. Like, I don't know the depth charts well enough to be like how many of the 24, because sometimes we can then lean into that number because it's more dramatic. But let's just say it's not the team that went 13-0. It's not close to being the team that went 13-0. So that result is not like, I was being sarcastic when I tweeted out, I can't believe this team went 13-0, because I knew, and that was me making fun of the people that actually felt like you had some definitive deal with all of this. Now, the problem is like, as much as I'm on Florida State fans' side when that was happening to them, you then can't watch Bama and Michigan. You can't lose by 60, even with a limited team. You can't lose by 60 and then go, hey, Bama sucks. Like it should have been us. But again, we're asking a fan base, and not specific even to Florida State, although they've had some moments over the last 10 years. You're like, dude, you guys give out credits for this stuff? Because here's what I'd ask Florida State fans. If Georgia had 20-something guys missing that actually mattered and their quarterback was out and you won 60 by 60 points, would you ever say, well, Georgia didn't have their guys? Of course not. You'd be like, we won by 60. We would have beaten Bama, we would have beaten Michigan, we would have beaten all these different teams. So like I was on Florida State's side knowing full well it's like pointless ever trying to get to the, would there have been any Bama Michigan result where Florida State fans would have gone, yeah, all right, the committee got it right? Of course not. Because I mean, the fan base cannot.
I think that to me, like this whole thing is asinine. Okay. It's so simple to me. Florida State forfeited without forfeiting. They had to put a product on the field, but they really forfeited that game. 24 guys out. The strength of their team was their defensive line. 3 of their 4 starters and I think a backup or 2 weren't even playing. All right. So to me, like if we're going to sit here after that game and put any tie correlation, whatever, into what could have happened, what should have happened, like it's ridiculous. There's that outcome. What we saw on that field has nothing to do with what we talked about after the selection committee decided to keep Florida State out the playoffs. The second thing is, without Jordan Travis at quarterback, Georgia's going to beat them 10 out of 10 times if everybody else is on the field. They just are, okay? If with Jordan Travis in there, I still think Georgia's a better team. I still think there are probably 2, maybe 3 better teams in the college football playoff. But if Jordan Travis is in there, A, they're in the college football playoff. But B, they've got a chance to win a game or potentially win 2 games. They do. I still can think Georgia's a better team. But they would, to me, Florida State would have had a legitimate shot of pulling off an upset and winning the national championship. But they're like, these are 3 different things. You don't have Jordan Travis. Ultimately, that's why they're not in the college football playoff. Pure and simple. And the game's not like, we just watched Michigan battle it out against Alabama. Wasn't the most, aesthetically pleasing game in the world, but we had 2 iconic head coaches, 2 great programs, with depth, with quarterback play, highs and lows, obviously, from Alabama, offensive and defensive. Like, they're stacked, 2 teams that were stacked and delivered in the clutch. Then we had kind of this shootout going with Washington and Texas, 2 loaded teams. If Florida State made it into the playoff without Jordan Travis, one of those 2 games would not have been pretty. I'm convinced of that. And then the third thing I know, the first one is take nothing from that Georgia-Florida State game. The second is, without Jordan Travis, I hate to say it, they deserve to be in there, but they didn't belong. They couldn't compete. And the third thing is, I give a lot of credit to Kirby Smart. Instead of being like, I told you so, and you and I talked about this before we came on. Instead of being like, I told you so, like, we're Georgia. We won that 2 national championships. Like, we belong. We should have been in the college football playoff. It's like, you know what? Pump the brakes. What just happened isn't right for college football, and we got to get this thing fixed. And I know a 12-game playoff will help, help that cause moving forward next year. But this bowl season, let's just call it sucked. I remember
it was
5-6 years,
no.
5-6 years ago, like waiting, like being at family's house, couldn't wait for games, like midday on the 23rd of December, or the 27th of December, like couldn't get ready to fly out and watching games like on the 28th when I was at the Rose Bowl, like preparing for the game. Like I remember being so excited for these matchups, like, oh, Michigan's playing Alabama in the Citrus Bowl. This system is now broken. We kind of knew it was going to get here. And I give Kirby Smart, instead of like putting on this campaign about how we should have been playing in the playoff, being like, come on, guys, like we got to fix what's going on now.
I loved that from Kirby Smart. Probably one of my favorite things. Not like I'm a Kirby Smart historian, but he's never done anything where I've been like, hey, what's going on with that guy? Because when I was watching Kirby do that, all I could think of was like, I was trying to go like, imagine Jimbo Fisher being like a team that had been left out and then winning 63-3. And what he would have done, he would have just spent the whole time talking about how they should have gotten in, completely dismissing the idea that 24 guys are missing from Florida State. Like, I don't know if Dabo would have done it in prime Dabo. Like, Dabo will have some moments where you're like, come on, dude. Like, what are you talking about? And the fact that Kirby, instead of campaigning, which is pointless, the season's over. Like, you don't need to do it. And he didn't. And I thought it was really cool from him in that moment. But, the initial thing that I've said, and I've said forever, and now we don't have to worry about it, because look, with the extra playoff games, there'll be more bowl games that matter. I will enjoy the games. I will watch the games. But my fundamental belief, which everybody disagrees with me on, is I would rather leave a couple deserving teams out than have multiple teams that don't deserve anything playing for a national championship. Like Penn State would have played for a national championship this year. They have not had a good regular season win in 2 years. And they would have played for a national championship in back-to-back years. That's not about Penn State specifically. It's about the concept of that team. And so with a 10-year run of results with a 4-team playoff, which by design was always set up to at least screw one, if not two, Power 5 conferences, we had a lot of people saying, well, the committee's never done this before. Well, we're only visiting with this process. You wouldn't visit a part of the world and then expect to be an expert on their weather unless you would live there for 10 years, And
Great
in this
point.
case, like the smaller sample of just 10 years of selection committee results, like, oh, well, they've never taken a group of 5. Well, okay, then they did. Oh, they never left out a 13-0 undefeated. Okay, well, this year they did. We saw, instead of years of the Clemson, Georgia, Bama cycle of like, man, there's no parity. It's only those teams. We had at the top real parity this year. And you could see 2 weeks out with the season going, you're like 7/8 teams might still be alive for this playoff. Somebody was going to be left out. But the problem in life, and I've learned this over the last few years, we only pay attention to the bias that negatively impacts us. We only pay attention to the bias that we don't like. And you want to know why I remember that? It's because I remember being Captain 617 and watching the end of the year NFL highlight stuff and then being like, why are the Patriots always on the bad side of all of these plays? Because I wasn't keeping a mental track. Right. But I wasn't keeping a mental track of the times the Cardinals were the bad team in the NFL highlight video, or the time the Packers had something go wrong, or the time the Bucks, because I had no emotional relationship. I had no attachment to it. Every time the Pats had a play, the time Barry Sanders turns the Pats corner around. So I'd actually be upset being like, oh, the NFL. This is before any of the Goodell stuff. This is before any of the Deflategate. This is before Belichick, Spygate, the deflated footballs, any of it. I was obsessed fan that was convinced, because I was only noticing, I was only registering some kind of reaction when it was happening against my team. So in the case of this Florida State thing, which I guess we kind of put to bed until the next fan base feels like they're left out in the new format because they were ranked 14th and they think they had a better chance of the team that was ranked 12th. Like, it sucks. I get your angst, but we would have had, if we did this for 30 years, we would have had multiple seasons where an undefeated Power 5 team probably would have been left out for some reason that didn't sit well with that fan base.